far removed from the fool. At the gate of the wise he has nothing to say. He who but considers doing evil, him they will call master of schemes. Foolish thoughts are sinful. Men deem a scoffer anathema. Because you weakened yourself on the day of another's distress, your own strength will diminish. If you fail to rescue those being taken to their death, destined for slaughter, you will object, but we didn't know of this. He who assesses men's hearts discerns. He who guards your life knows. He will repay each man as he deserves. My son, just as eating honey is as good as sweet droplets upon your palate, so too is striving to achieve wisdom for yourself. If you succeed, there is a future. Your hope will not be cut off. Good evening, good Vach, Shavua Tov, a good week to you, my holy sisters and brothers. While the counter was counting down, I was just reading a bit from Proverbs. Really, you can never read enough Proverbs. You should spend more time reading Proverbs. That was from chapter 24. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Saturday night? Nancy in North Carolina. Heather says shalom. Shandora in the Bronx. Paul in the Great Northwest. Bella in Florida. Karen in Northern California. Melissa in Great Neck. Paula in Chicago. Olga in North Texas. Duncan in Mobile, Alabama. And as always, I am so profoundly impressed with the people on the East Coast and throughout the country, starting the week even so late on a Saturday night, or shall I say early on a Sunday morning, learning together. Spectacular. Also welcoming Heather in Hawaii, Aoife in Florida, Marjorie in Georgia, and Marie saying Shavua Tov. Welcome everybody. We have a short and sweet daf. Lamed Vav, page 36, here in Tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud, the laws of divorce. We are in chapter 4, continuing tonight our discussion of Mishna number 3, which held that a widow can collect payment from the property of orphans only by means of an oath that she did not already receive some of that payment during the lifetime of her husband. And Rabban Gamliel the elder instituted that she should take for the benefit of the orphans any vow that the orphans want her to vow. Right? If you're going to take property from an orphan, it's a general principle that you have to swear a vow that you haven't received that money from the estate already or from the man before he died. And why are we even learning this in Tractate Gittin? Because along the same lines, we learned that the witnesses signed their names on the bill of divorce, even though the bill of divorce is valid without their signatures. Why? For tikkun ha'olam, for the betterment of the world. And Hillel instituted a document that prevents the sabbatical year from canceling debts, known as a prosbol. That's what the Mishna said, and we're going to continue our discussion of that Mishnah. Pick it up a few paragraphs from the top of page 36a. It's darker in here than usual. This bulb burnt out. That's what's happening. Okay. I'll have to fix that later. You get older and you appreciate light on your book. This is my book light. Why is that? I'll do my best to muddle through. Okay. The Mishnah taught, and the witnesses signed the bill of divorce for the betterment of the world. And the Gemara asks, is the reason that the witnesses signed the bill of divorce, the get, for the betterment of the world? It is by Torah law that they must sign, as it is written from Jeremiah 32:44, and subscribe the deeds and sign them and call witnesses. Already at the time of Jeremiah, witnesses were required for a legal document. What are you talking about? That the sages instituted for the betterment of the world, that witnesses should sign the get? It's a legal document. It must be required that witnesses sign it. And Rabbah said, no, it is necessary according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. who says witnesses of the transmission of the get affect the divorce. What's necessary is that there are witnesses present when the husband or his agent hands the get to the wife. That's the moment that she becomes divorced from him, and witnesses have to be there for that. Even if witnesses didn't sign the get itself, if there were witnesses to the giving of the get, then the divorce takes hold. So since it wasn't required previously by Torah law, at least according to the view of Rabbi Elazar, to have the witnesses sign the get, it was by decree of the sages that it became a requirement that witnesses sign the get. Nevertheless, right, even though the get is valid, just if witnesses witness the transmission, nevertheless, the sages instituted signatory witnesses for the betterment of the world, as sometimes it occurs that the witnesses who witness the transmission of the bill of divorce die, or sometimes it occurs that they go overseas, and the validity of the bill of divorce may be contested since they are not present, and there are no witnesses who can ratify the bill of divorce. Once the sages instituted that the witnesses' signatures appear on the bill of divorce, then the bill of divorce can be ratified by authenticating their signatures. I'm actually going to use the wisdom candle to help me read the text. Okay. Here we go. So Rav Yosef said, you can even say that it is according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir that signatory witnesses on the bill of divorce affect the divorce. And the Mishnah should be understood as follows. They instituted that the witnesses must specify their full names on bills of divorce and not merely sign the document for the betterment of the world. As it is taught in a Baraisa, Tosefta 9:13, at first the witnesses would write only, I, so-and-so, signed as a witness, but they did not state their full names. Therefore, the only way to identify the witness was to see if an identical signature could be found on a different document that had been ratified in court. Therefore, if another copy of a witness's signature is produced from elsewhere, i.e. another court document, it is valid, but if not, then the get is invalid, even though it is possible that he was a valid witness. And as a result of this, women were left unable to remarry. So, understand, really what it is required for the husband to divorce the wife is to write out, you are hereby permitted to other men and prohibited to me, right, by inference, and we are divorced, right? He writes out that we are divorced, and he hands her that document, or his agent hands her that document in the presence of witnesses. But if the get would be challenged later, they'd have to bring those witnesses who saw that the get was given in a fully legal manner. And if those witnesses were unavailable or couldn't be found or they had died, it would be a real problem. So they said, okay, let's be smart. Let's have witnesses sign the get so that we can find them easier. Or even if we can't find them, we can ratify their signatures. Once we had this thing, okay, as long as we can ratify their signatures, meaning we can produce people who recognize their signatures and say, yes, that witness's signature is a valid signature, so then it's a valid get. So then they wanted to make sure that they could find the people who would recognize the witness's signature, and so they also required that the witnesses sign properly. Right? Remember, in the ancient world, they didn't have last names. So it was, somebody like me would say, I am Yoel, the son of Avinoam. But maybe there's another Yoel ben Avinoam somewhere else. So I would say, I am Yoel, the son of Avinoam, residing in this town, in the year, etc. They would add these details so that it would be easier to ratify signatures later. Rabban Gamliel said, they instituted a great ordinance that the witnesses must specify their full names on bills of divorce. Now I'm understanding, right? In the old days, what you want is that the light gets thrown that way, but the flame is not blocking, This is getting ridiculous. Okay, well, this works quite well, though. If If you're just tuning in now, you think I'm crazy. But my light bulb is out, so I'm having trouble seeing. Okay. Where am I? Rabban Gamliel said they instituted a great ordinance that the witnesses must specify their full names on bills of divorce, stating that they are so and so. Must be distracted. Sorry. Okay. Rabban Gamliel said they instituted a great ordinance that the witnesses must specify their full names on bills of divorce, stating that they are so and so, the son of so and other identifying features for the betterment of the world. And this made it possible to easily clarify who the witnesses were and to ratify the bill of divorce by finding acquaintances of the witnesses who recognize their signatures. And the Gemara asks, but is it not sufficient to sign with a pictorial mark? Right? You've seen in movies somebody who couldn't read and write, they needed him to sign a contract, you would make an X, right? Or sometimes they would use some other figure as their signature. And now we're about to learn that some of the great sages actually had little symbolic signatures rather than writing out their names. But Rav drew a fish instead of a signature, and Rabbi Hanina drew a palm branch, Harusa. Rav Chisda drew the letter Samech, and Rav Hoshaya drew the letter Ayin. And Rav Bar Rav Huna drew a sail. None of these, like a sail of a boat. And none of these sages would sign their actual names. And the Gemara answers the sages are different, as everyone was well versed in their pictorial marks. Are you going to tell me that the sages couldn't sign their own names because they were illiterate? Obviously not. They were sages who had all of Scripture memorized and so well versed and, wrote opinions and letters, etc. Of course they were literate. Why did they sign with some little figure, some little picture? Because they had to sign their names so often, and it became a distinguishing feature for them to just make some quick little pictogram. And the Gemara asks, initially, with what did they publicize these marks, as they could not use them in place of signatures before people were well versed in the little picture that meant the signature of some great sage? And the Gemara answers, initially, they used these pictorial marks in letters where there is no legal requirement to sign their names. And once it became known, they would use these marks as their signatures. Once it became known that they used these marks as their signatures, they were able to use them as signatures even on legal documents. Now, the Mishna taught that Hillel the elder instituted a document that prevents the sabbatical year from abrogating an outstanding debt, and this is called a prosbol. So we learned in a Mishnah there in Shevi'it 10:3, if one writes a prosbol, the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt. And this is one of the matters that Hillel the elder instituted because he saw that the people of the nation were refraining from lending to one another around the time of the sabbatical year, as they were concerned that the debtor would not repay the loan because it would be canceled by the sabbatical year. And then these people who started to refrain from lending were violating that which is written in the Torah. Quote, beware that there be not a base thought in your heart, saying, the seventh year, the year of release, is at hand, and your eye be evil against your needy brother, and you give him nothing, meaning you lend him nothing because the debts will be canceled. So Hillel the elder arose and instituted the prosbol so that it would also be possible to collect those debts in order to ensure that people would continue to give loans. And this is the essence of the text of the prosbol. I transfer to you, so-and-so, the judges, who are in such and such a place, so that I will collect any debt that I am owed by so-and-so, the borrower, whenever I wish, as the court now has the right to collect the debts, and the judges or the witnesses sign below, and this is sufficient. And the creditor will then be able to collect the debt on behalf of the court, and the court can give it to him, right? Because the lender transferred the right to receive the repayment of the loan to the court. right? So debts between individuals are canceled with the sabbatical year, but a debt to an institution like the court is not canceled by the sabbatical year. So by instituting the prosbol, Hillel ensured that liquidity of lending would continue even as the sabbatical year approached. And this was a benefit to the needy because they could continue to get loans. And it was a benefit to the lenders because they had their loans protected. So the Gemara asks about the prosbol itself, but is there anything like this whereby Torah law, the sabbatical year cancels the debt, but Hillel instituted that it does not cancel the debt? I mean, is this some kind of a rabbinic decree that violates Torah law? Asks the Gemara. So Abaye answers the Baraisa is referring to the sabbatical year in the present, and it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Now, when Abaye is talking about the present, he's talking about when he was living and teaching, right, in the times of the Gemara. So let's say sometime between the year 200 and the year 500 of the Common Era. And what he meant is the temple had already been destroyed in Jerusalem. So any laws that were still extant that had to do with sabbatical years were only by rabbinic decree, since by Torah law, once the temple was destroyed, we weren't collecting tithes for the priests, and the sabbatical years weren't being observed in the same way. We continued to observe the sabbatical year by rabbinic decree, but not by Torah law because the temple had been destroyed. So what they're saying here is that the sabbatical year, does it cancel debt or does it not cancel debt now that the temple has been destroyed? Now, as it is taught in a Baraisa, that Rebbe, right, whenever we say Rebbe, we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the redactor of the Mishnah. It is taught in a Baraisa that Rebbe says, the verse states in the context of the cancellation of debts in Deuteronomy 15:2, and this is the manner of the abrogation, he shall abrogate. Because this word abrogate, canceling the debts, this verb abrogate is mentioned twice, means that the verse speaks of two types of abrogation. One is the release of land, and one is the abrogation of monetary debts. Since the two are equated, one can learn the following. At a time when you release land, meaning when the Jubilee year, the Yovel, is practiced, right? Every 50 years, any land that had been bought within Israel between Jews would revert to the original owner, or at least the family of the original owner, because of the ancestral portions that were distributed when Joshua led the children of Israel into Israel. The Torah said that every 50 years, any land that had been bought or sold goes back to its ancestral heritage so that the tribes, would maintain their distinct regions in the land. Right? So what they're saying here is, once you stopped observing the Yovel, right, which happened after the second temple was destroyed, then also you would not cancel debts in the sabbatical year, because abrogation of land and abrogation of money debts are equated in the Torah. If you're not returning lands that are bought or sold to the ancestral portions, then you're also not canceling debts, is the concept. At a time when you release land, meaning when the Yovel is practiced, you abrogate money debts. And at a time when you do not release land, such as the present time, which includes now, but really, they meant their present time 1,500 years ago, at a time when you do not release land, such as the present time, when the Yovel is no longer practiced, when the Jubilee year is no longer practiced, you also do not abrogate monetary debts. And the sages instituted that despite this, the sabbatical year will abrogate debt in the present in remembrance of the Torah mandated sabbatical year. Even though the temple had been destroyed and certain things were not done by Torah law anymore, the sages decreed that we would continue doing them in remembrance of how we lived in an absolute Torah law society when the temple stood and we had sovereignty over the land of Israel. Hillel saw, so they instituted that the debts would be canceled. Well, then Hillel the elder saw that when debts were being canceled, people weren't lending as the year approached, so he instituted the prosbol. Hillel saw that the people of the nation refrained from lending to each other, so he arose and instituted the prosbol. According to this explanation, the ordinance of Hillel did not conflict with the Torah law. Rather, he added an ordinance to counter the effect of a rabbinic law. Now we're on 36b. According to this explanation, the sages instituted that even in the present, the sabbatical year would bring a cancellation of debt, despite the fact that by Torah law, the debt would still stand. It wouldn't be canceled. The Gemara asks, but is there anything like this where by Torah law, the sabbatical year does not cancel the debt? And the sages instituted that it will cancel? It is as though the sages were instructing the debtors to steal from their creditors, as by Torah law they still owe the money. So Abaye says, no, this is not actual theft. It is an instruction to sit passively and do not do anything. The sages have the authority to instruct one to passively violate a Torah law, presumably so they can fulfill some other Torah law. But at any rate, to instruct one to passively violate a Torah law, so long as no action is taken. Rava says the sages are able to institute this ordinance because property declared ownerless by the court is ownerless. The court, or at least a rabbinic court of sufficient authority, has the authority to remove property from its owner and declare that that property is ownerless. The court has that power. As it is stated from Ezra 10:8, and whoever did not come within 3 days, according to the counsel of the princes and the elders, all of his property shall be forfeited, and he shall be separated from the congregation of the captivity. Right? That was at the time that they were using the sort of court authority to get the Jewish community back into Israel at the end of the Babylonian exile and to start building the second temple. So Rabbi Eliezer said the law that property declared ownerless by the court is ownerless is derived from another place, from here. The verse states in the book of Joshua, 1951, these are the inheritances which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the fathers of the houses of the tribes of the children of Israel distributed for their inheritance, right, when the land was distributed. And the Gemara asks, what do the heads have to do with the fathers? And it comes to tell you, just as the fathers transmit anything they wish to their children, so too the heads of the nation transmit to the people anything that they wish. And this demonstrates that the court has the authority to take property from one person and to give it to another. Therefore, the sages have the authority to decide that all debts are canceled. Now, a dilemma was raised before the sages. When Hillel instituted the prosbol, this legal device, the prosbol, so that the debts wouldn't be canceled by the sabbatical year, was it for his generation alone that he instituted it and the custom developed to continue using the prosbol in later generations? Or did Hillel institute the prosbol for all generations? This the Gemara asks, what difference is there whether it was instituted for his generation only or for all generations, when either way it is still in use? And the Gemara explains the difference arises with regard to nullifying the institution of prosbol. If you say that it was for his generation alone that he instituted it, then we can nullify it if we desire. But if you say that he instituted it also for all generations, then there is a principle that a court can nullify the action of another court only if it is greater than it in wisdom and in number. Therefore, we would not be able to nullify the ordinance instituted by Hillel and his court. What then is the law? And so the Gemara suggests a resolution to the dilemma. Come and hear that which Shmuel said Shmuel said, we write a prosbol only in the court of Surah or in the court of Nehardea. These were big Torah centers in Babylonia, within the Persian Empire, as they were the primary centers of Torah study, but not in any other court. And if it enters your mind to say that he instituted it also for all generations, then let them write a prosbol in the other courts as well. So the Gemara rejects this proof. Perhaps when Hillel instituted the prosbol, he did so for all generations, but only for courts such as his court, which was the primary court of his time, and courts like those of Rav Ami and Rav Asi, as they have the power to remove money from someone's possession. However, for all other courts, which are not as authoritative, he did not institute this ordinance. Therefore, the statement of Shmuel cannot serve as a proof with regard to the manner in which the prosbol was instituted. Right? We're still trying to figure out when Hillel the elder instituted the prosbol. Was it for his generation alone or for all generations? So the Gemara suggests another proof. Come in here that which Shmuel said, this prosbol, the device of the prosbol, is an ulbana of the judges. An ulbana, some kind of a disgrace, an embarrassment. So said Shmuel, this prosbol is an ulbana of the judges. If my strength increases, I will nullify it. So the Gemara challenges this statement. How could Shmuel say, I will nullify it? But isn't it the case that a court can nullify the action of another court only if it is greater than it in wisdom and in number? It must be, meaning the number of judges, and greater in wisdom, like a higher court, right? Like there, in the sort of rabbinic tradition, there's not like such a specific hierarchy as you would see, for example, in the federal courts of America, right, where you have a circuit court, and then a court of appeals, right, and then the Supreme Court. So you have various courts in various places. I mean, of course, when the Sanhedrin met in Jerusalem, that was the highest court. There's no court higher than it. But lesser courts, how do you judge how great a court it is? And you would say, well, first of all, how many judges served on that court? And what was the makeup of those judges? Did they include well-known prominent Torah scholars or not? So then you would say that a court, in order to nullify the decree of another court, had to be greater than it in both wisdom and number of judges. So how could Shmuel arise and say he would like to nullify the prosbol that was instituted by Hillel? Generally speaking, when you talk about sages in later generations than earlier sages, our assumption is that the earlier sages are greater in wisdom. We don't grow in wisdom through the generations. We understand that the earlier generations had greater access to the original wisdom transmitted at Mount Sinai because they were closer in time to the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai. Just in terms of halacha, I mean, science may grow, economics may grow, all kinds of pursuits of knowledge may grow, but even though, of course, we have novelty, like novel rulings and great Torah scholars over the generations, still we have this assumption that those that were closer in time to Mount Sinai were somehow greater. So said Shmuel, this prosbol is an embarrassment of the judges. If my strength increases, I will nullify it. But how could he say I will nullify it? Isn't it the case that a court can nullify the action of another court only if it is greater in wisdom and number? So it must be that Shmuel holds that Hillel did not establish the prosbol for all generations, and in his time it only carried the force of a custom. It no longer had the force of a decree. It only had the force of custom, and that's why Shmuel said, I will nullify it. But the Gemara rejects this proof. It can be explained that this is what Shmuel was actually saying. If my strength increases so that I become greater than Hillel, then I will nullify the prosbol. He wasn't able to do it. He didn't become somehow greater than Hillel, but he was saying he wished he could do it. By contrast, Rav Nachman said, if my strength increases, I will uphold the institution of the prosbol. So the Gemara asks, what is meant by I will uphold it? Isn't it upheld and standing? We have the institution of prosbol now. So why does the prosbol require further support? And the Gemara explains, this is what he said, if my strength increases, I will say something about it. And I will institute that even though the prosbol was not written, it is considered as though it was written. And then people would no longer need to write a prosbol, as it would be considered as if everyone wrote one. A dilemma was raised before the sages. This ulbana of the judges that Shmuel speaks of, is it a term of insolence in that the judges are, according to Shmuel, enabling lenders to insolently collect debts that are not due to them? Or is it a term of convenience in that the judges are saving themselves the inconvenience of having to actually collect the debts detailed in the promissory notes? And the Gemara suggests a proof. Come in here that which Ula said in describing the Jewish people after they sinned with the golden calf, immediately following the revelation at Mount Sinai, using the same word, not insolent. I called it an embarrassment or a disgrace, but a better translation is insolent, right? So insolent, same root as ulbana, in Hebrew aluva. Insolent is the bride who is promiscuous under her wedding canopy. In other words, it brings disgrace to her husband because imagine somebody so brazen and insolent that they would cheat at their own wedding. Who would do such a thing? Metaphorically, we did that, right? Because God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, and while he was still engaged in giving it to Moses during the 40 days that Moses spent on top of the mountain, the people freaked out, thought Moses wasn't coming back, and created the golden calf and danced and worshipped around it, which was, maybe the greatest sin of all time. And in a sense, it was like the bride, the children of Israel, cheated at their wedding to God. So Rab Mari, the son of Shmuel's daughter, says, what is the verse from which it is derived? So he points to Song of Songs. While the king sat at his table, my spikenard sent forth its fragrance. And he understands the verse in the following manner. While the king was still involved in his celebration, i.e. God had just given the Torah, the perfume of the Jewish people gave off an unpleasant odor, i.e. they sinned with the golden calf. Rava says, nevertheless, it is apparent from the verse that the affection of God is still upon us, as it is written euphemistically, sent forth its fragrance, and the verse is not written, it reeked of that fragrance. So the Gemara continues discussing the meaning of this word ulbana. The sages taught those who are insulted, ne'alavin, but do not insult others, who hear their shame but do not respond, who act out of love and are joyful in their suffering, about them the verse states, and they that love him are as the sun going forth in its might, from Judges 5:31. And that's where we're going to leave off for tonight. So tomorrow we'll continue trying to understand, the device, the legal device, the prosbol, was instituted, right, as a service to the needy so that they could still get loans as the sabbatical year approached. The mechanism of it was that the lender would transfer this asset, right, that money is owed to him. He would transfer that, legally speaking, to the court, and then because it was owed to the court, not to the lender, it wouldn't be canceled by the sabbatical year, and then the lender could act as an agent of the court and collect the loan that's really owed to him, but now legally speaking is owed to the court, and he's collecting it on behalf of the court, and then the court would transfer it to him, so the lender still ends up with the money. Why is this device described as an ulbana of the court, either an insult to the court or an insult that the court is committing, that the court is being insolent, or the device is insolent to the judges? We'll continue that discussion tomorrow at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. It's late. Let's see if we've got a couple questions. On Gittin 36. I'll also mention, while I'm waiting for the document to load, that on Monday, there won't be class. We will have class tomorrow, Sunday, but there won't be class on Monday because I'm participating in a charity event for Tomchei Shabbos, great organization here in LA that provides Shabbos meals for the needy. But so I won't be available on Monday. So we'll have class on Sunday and then again on Tuesday. Okay, Nina is saying that Sharon and Olga are having a conversation. Sharon says it would seem that it would be essential to validate the husband's signature on the get, not just those of the witnesses. Olga says, I think the witnesses are the validation of the husband's signature, just so, much like a notary public today authenticates the signatory of an important document. Sharon says, that's how I understood it, but this is saying that the witnesses are not necessary on the writing of the get, but on its delivery to the wife. Yes, but I guess what, essentially you could have a get by Torah law that's a valid get, that the witnesses are there for the transmission. I guess what they're vouching for is not just that they saw a paper delivered to the wife, but that they are the witnesses that a valid get was delivered to the wife. Otherwise, they're not doing their job as witnesses. And then the sages instituted for Tikkun HaOlam that they would also sign the get so they could be found later, or at least their signatures could be ratified. That's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, see you tomorrow night, Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Good Vok, Shavua Tov. Have a great week.